YNW Melly's trial is now over. He will have a mistrial as the jury were deadlocked with their decision. This is Fresh Hip Hop Opinion. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification button. And also check out the description. Alright, let's get into it. Unless you've been living under a rock, YNW Melly's trial has been the most trending thing out there. And the trial ended a few days ago, and it was left to the jury to decide whether he was guilty, innocent, facing the death penalty. So after some time of deliberation, the jury could not get to a unanimous decision, which is therefore deadlocked. So there will be a mistrial, probably maybe towards the end of the year. Now, a lot of your YNW Melly fans were very happy about this, but even Melly's own legal team were not too happy. They wanted an innocent verdict so he can go home, obviously, but at least he's not getting the sparky. And it's been split online whether people are surprised or not surprised. A lot of people did feel like he was going to be found guilty, but I think it was a bit 50-50. I couldn't decide which way the jury were going to go. But I personally felt like he was guilty and would be found guilty, but I didn't think he'd get the death penalty. But let's go quickly through the key points of the trial that had everybody at the edge of their seats. For the
prosecution,
the main points were that YNW Melly was there and that the phone was actually his, because it was pinging in the area of where the actual murder was. And then they went into how there were a lot of steps at the time of the murder at like 3 or 4 in the morning, which is obviously is a bit suspect. They also looked at the trajectory of the bullets that hit the car. They were all in a very circular shape, which is consistent with a car not moving. Whereas if it was a drive-by, like Portland said, the shape of the bullets entering the car would have been different, which I think was very, very damning for the defense. The blood splatter in the car also, there was a space where Melly was sitting, as we saw on the CCTV, that showed that Melly was still sitting there when the murders occurred because there was no blood in that exact area. So something was blocking it from hitting the back seat where Melly was sitting. Also, the entry wounds into Juvy and Sakchaser was very consistent of somebody sitting from the back seat at the left where Melly was sitting. So it would have been very difficult for someone like Portland to have done that shooting. They knew it was coming from that left rear passenger side in the vehicle. There's also motive, which a lot of people felt there wasn't enough motive for him to kill his childhood friends. But Sakchaser and Melly were having a lot of problems prior to the actual murders. Sakchaser was even having issues with Melly's mom. They had arguments. There was even a rumor that Melly and Sakchaser had a physical altercation, which I don't believe was actually proven. Another suspect thing which had everybody looking at it like, was the fact that they drove to a very remote location and that's where they were killed. There was no houses, there was no shops, it was super remote. But then it also now looks premeditated, which really disturbing. And obviously another part for the prosecution that which was obvious was that there was obviously no drive-by shooting. There was no physical evidence in the area that Portland said the shooting happened, which obviously there would be broken glass on the ground, but there was nothing like that. And then there's the shell casing that they found actually in the vehicle as well, which shows that there was a shooting from inside the car. But there was no DNA on the bullet tying to Melly or Portland. The prosecution also went into the fact that Melly was in a gang, or is in a gang. They showed a lot of twisting his fingers up, you know, the gang signs and all that. So they kind of felt like it might have been some sort of initiation into the gang to kill his 2 friends, which I'm a bit suspicious on that. I think it was just maybe a heat of the moment. But why would you kill 2 people in your own car and then have such a flimsy alibi? It looked a bit more spontaneous, but who knows? And then the final thing was one of the witnesses confirmed that Melly did change his clothes after the murder when they met up afterwards. So that again is damning. Obviously blood splatter maybe have gotten his clothes, so he went home and changed them. So that again was a strong bit of evidence for the prosecution. Going into the defense side now, they weren't very proactive with their actual witnesses. They didn't bring anybody, but their tactic was more of to poke holes in the prosecution's witnesses that they brought up, which they did a pretty good job most of the time. But some of that evidence the prosecution had was so strong they couldn't really do anything with it. But an example of this is when the prosecution brought in the lead detective Melly's defense really showed how many avenues that the lead detective did not follow up on, like threats that Melly was getting online around the time of the murders. The detective didn't investigate that at all. Another suspect thing, which I think is the biggest suspect aspect of the trial, was that they found like DNA just before the trial started, which was a bit weird. Like, this murders happened 4 or 5 years ago, but they found new evidence just before the trial. So it kind of looks like maybe the investigators maybe planted some stuff. They were kind of moving the angle of, oh, they're jealous of this young rapper making more money than them. But it was suspicious the way they found evidence not long before the trial and while the trial was actually happening. They had one good witness from the defense who basically corroborated that Melly was distraught when he found out about the killings, and he was upset. And he even confirmed that the phone that they were using was used by multiple people. So again, it's casting a bit of doubt that the phone itself was Melly's and maybe he wasn't actually at the murder. Another thing that I felt was overall the theme that the defense tried to put into the minds of the jury was that Bortland was the actual shooter, or could have been the shooter. And again, it's not about snitching on Bortland, but it's about casting doubt that Melly actually is the shooter. Because if there's any doubt, you can't give a guilty verdict. It was a good ploy, but for me, the prosecution's witnesses that explained the trajectory of the way the bullets entered the victims, it was super unlikely that the driver, Bortland, would have done those shootings. Particularly where the physical evidence got on Bortland, it was impossible for him to have done the shooting. But overall, it was a really entertaining trial. I feel like most people, that Melly did do the shooting, but in a court of law, you have to prove without any reasonable doubt. If there's a bit of doubt, then you've got to make the person innocent or not guilty anyway. But the whole trial was like a whole Netflix series. I'm sure they will make some sort of TV documentary about it. I mean, from Melly's antics at the beginning, doing some weird prayer and kissing in the air, to him smiling a lot with his legal team and at people in the courtroom. Even the crazy rumor that he was having some sort of affair with his female legal representative. And speaking of the legal teams, things got really fiery in the courtrooms between the defense and the prosecution. Even at one point, the judge had a go at the defense for being too aggressive. But is it a good result for Melly? He seemed very happy at the end, but the best thing would have been maybe a solution right now. But having to do this all again, it'll be interesting to see if he keeps the same defense team or the prosecution stays the same. But what's your thoughts on the trial? What was your favorite aspects? Do you think Melly's guilty, innocent? Are you happy with the mistrial? Leave a comment below. It's fresh hip hop opinion. Peace and love.